title card.
I don't have the title card. It's missing for some reason.
Okay, now we're just go straight to it.
Yeah. You're good to go.
Hey, welcome everybody to With Thunderous Applause, a podcast where two friends get together and discuss the events and ideas that will shape our uncertain future. I am your host, Steve, along with my co-host, Zach. What's up?
Not much, but I believe a bit was up with you, as you were talking about prior to us going live.
A bit's up with me?
Yeah. Maybe fill everybody in on what you were saying prior to us going live.
Okay, well, today's show is going to be discussing kind of geopolitical implications of support for Israel, which is clearly, committing war crimes and an aggressor in most ways, and really doesn't have a leg to stand on outside of the ministries of propaganda. And I was mentioning to Zach when we were doing final prep, that Norman Finkelstein, who is I guess you could say, the definitive expert on the politics of the Gaza issue or the Palestinian issue, when posed with when that question was posed to them, they said that BRICS had nothing to do with it, oil had nothing to do with it. Like, this isn't like an economic thing at all. And kind of, my kind of analysis of it is that, like, there is no politics on the planet that aren't ultimately rooted in energy and raw materials, because industrial economies and in the veracity is not the right word, the fucking unending hunger or whatever of industrial
Voraciousness.
What's that?
Voraciousness or veracity?
Voraciousness, yeah, of industrial economies, like, has defined world politics since at least, you could say, probably the American Civil War at minimum. Because that was also, as we've discussed before, an economic shift, right, and a political power imbalance that was ultimately righted by the Civil War, when the old way of doing things was finally put to rest, or give it its death blow, and then it took Reconstruction to kind of unwind that economically and build something new. But also, like, the racial terror never stopped,
Right.
even to this day. But my point being is that I think that Norm Finkelstein has, and he's a much more learned person than me, but just kind of approaching it from that really practical sense. Is it really no decisions factor into, no geopolitical decisions are made with the complete disregard of the fundamental purpose of making war, which is securing those resources for your people. Because people without resources, as we're going to find out real fucking soon, people without resources don't let their government stay in power.
Yeah.
And then so they'll lose their monopoly on having the advantageous position in the imperial wealth pump if the people further down are unhappy. And I think you can argue that we are. And my point to Norm Finkelstein, to wrap this up and begin the show, is although it is a thread that runs throughout what we're talking about today, obviously we're going to provide the evidence to say, no, Norm, you're actually wrong. Or maybe you're not, maybe you're missing the forest for the trees or whatever. But I think that if you took Israel and put it in Canada and say, like, just stole indigenous lands in Canada, and then the First Nations tribes committed acts of terror or whatever because they were confined to concentration camps, right? Like the Palestinians are.
Right.
I don't think, if it was in a region of Alaska that didn't have much for resources, right? Like no oil or tar sands or natural gas, no strategic geostrategic significance in terms of, like, there's no shore naval bases. You can't connect your war making space to the rest of your economy.
Right.
That I don't think that people would fucking care nearly as much. I don't think Western governments in the United States would give a shit about a country if it was in Canada. They give a shit about Israel because Israel is like the one kind of reliable puppet regime because it owes its very existence to support from the US and the West broadly, because it would have never been able to defend itself because all it does is fucking shit all over its neighbors and fucking pick fights with them and shit.
Yeah.
And then, you know,
Years.
oh well, you know, I got the US and the West in the back. And they also got nuclear weapons, and it was a big hush hush. They never made, like, when the fucking Pakistan got nuclear weapons. I remember the father of the Pakistani nuclear program was like all over magazines, and it was a huge fucking deal that like another country developed nukes, but fucking Israel developed nukes, like I think even before Pakistan did, and no one said a goddamn word. So that's like even violation of like international law for nuclear non-proliferation, right? And how did they get that information? They could have, they don't have enough resources and enough time realistically to develop the industrial economy where they could have achieved that on their own without being gifted it or buying it, right? Like through other means. Like, so basically from the very beginning, it's had the West in its corner. And there's a reason for that. And I think a lot of it comes out of like, remember Israel popped up right during the post-colonial era, right? Like, or right in kind of the final end of, I think India became a state around the time Israel did too, right? Like 1948 or something like that, right after World War II.
Yeah.
At any rate, so all these kind of like, they were rolling back their empires, right? Their colonial empires, and kind of restructuring them as economic empires. And that Israel popped up perfect. We now have a beachhead in the region of the world that has like the most liquid petroleum, and it turns out a fuck ton of natural gas.
Yeah.
And I have heard that the Syrian conflict is in part related to future planning for gas pipelines out of the Middle East into Europe. And there was kind of like, well, if we build a pipeline through Syria, then we want that our people to economically benefit from that, so we can build housing and provide medical care and provide education and all that shit, right? And of course, we're like, no, we don't like that. So Assad is persona non grata. Yeah, exactly. All right, so we're still working with what we did last time. We're going to title it a little different. But we're still going to.
Damn you, Steve. I said, are we? Damn you.
We'll talk about that offline. I have some reasoning behind it.
Okay.
But we are going to go through a number of sources and kind of frame, again, geopolitics within this fundamental reality that as metabolic organisms that have introduced into our daily lives, like the use of fossil energy, that the need for fossil energy now consumes us and directs how we conduct ourselves to ensure access to that for a host of reasons, as I described, because ruling classes want to remain in power. And the commoners need their bread and circuses and their fucking trips to Walmart in their Ford F-150s. It's just fucking reality.
I went to Walmart today.
You did go to Walmart?
Yeah.
I used to buy Magic cards at Walmart, and then I stopped playing Magic, so I haven't been to Walmart.
I needed carpet cleaner.
I need a carpet cleaner.
Yeah, they're the easiest source. What can I say?
Because the fucking cats are getting old, huh? Puking everywhere.
Yes.
Oh. No. I'm sure your landlord is not watching our podcast.
I'm sure he's aware of it, too.
But it could be inadmissible in court, so you're right. Really.
There you go. I've said nothing of any sort.
Redact that. Plead the fifth, I swear to God. All right.
Can't incriminate.
We're going to start with Nate Higgins.
The fifth.
There are two wars now happening between Israel and Palestine and beyond. There's the kinetic war, which we will see on the news. And there's the informational war and the propaganda from both sides, tilting public opinion. I've learned not to trust, especially things that come out right away and are well crafted. Sunday morning, the Wall Street Journal published an article saying that this was all planned in advance with the backing of Iran by 3 major journalists with all kinds of data. I mean, Sunday morning, color me a little skeptical on that, but I think Iran is going to become a 4-letter word, and I don't know the details here, but I think we are spiraling out of control with the geopolitical peace and relationships.
So yeah, sometimes it doesn't take a huge atrocity, to get everyone's attention. Be a minor one. Nope, you're muted. Still muted. You're still muted.
Swear to Christ, this is not the first podcast we've ever recorded. In fact, I think we're approaching 100, aren't we?
We're well over 100, I think.
Oh, we're over 100 now?
I think so, yeah.
I don't think we are, but we'll look at that later. We'll celebrate 100 if we've already passed it. No, I was trying to tell you to turn the volume up, and apparently I was muted because I had to cough, and so I muted myself.
Nice.
But I really like what Nate Hagen says here about kind of like just applying a basic, bare minimum of like critical thinking skills, right? He's like,
Yeah.
wait, you just happen to have all of this evidence like to prepare on the Sunday morning when you know the people who make decisions are reading the paper. Like it had very, very much deep state vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of this too, I've heard that by even people who would identify as Zionist, kind of almost have deep state conspiracies. They're like, wait a second, like, how are there these breaches in security and lapses in intelligence, and how are you like manufacturing consent for a war with Iran or whatever, like. And so ultimately, why might they want to go to war with Iran? Well, because it's been kind of a mortal enemy of Israel, and we've been able to play divide and conquer between Saudi Arabia and Iran for so goddamn long, and then fucking China comes along and is like, "Hey, let's negotiate. Let's fucking sit in a room and hash out your shit." And then they made them hash out their shit, and then they accepted them into BRICS once they hashed out their shit. Right. And so like now 2 of the larger economies and more resource rich and let's admit politically stable countries, right? Because the US is fucking destabilized Iraq, fucking Syria, along with Israel has destabilized Lebanon, right?
Right.
And then what do you have, like the fucking Emirates and Qatar? Right? Like a couple tiny states which have resources, but not that much resources. And certainly like don't command the same kind of economy that like Iran does. Like Iran is like, is a fully functional conventional army, right? Has a nuclear program clearly that even Joe Biden, after all the shit they talked to Trump, wouldn't fucking re-sign the JPCOA.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know if Iran would want to fucking be in it or not. I think they did, but the US was like, nope. So Trump took the fall for pulling out of it, right? But then we didn't go back into it because we don't want to be in an agreement with Iran. We want them to try and get nuclear weapons to give us an excuse to overthrow them because we're still fucking pissed. They overthrew our puppet regime back in the 1950s. I mean, that is the history, right?
Yeah. Well, and then they had nice stuff for a while, and then they went backwards a bit.
Well, and then we've been sanctioned the fuck out of them. And it's like the overuse of sanctions. It's interesting, too. I haven't heard it put in these terms, but it just kind of crossed my mind. The use of economic sanctions, which is meant to like punish the people so the people revolt against their governments.
Yeah.
In the case of Russia, in the case of Iran, like I think we overdid it so much that they just learned how to fucking work around it. Right. Yeah. Like, so they were sanctioned. So they're like, okay, rather than making us buckle, we just figured out a way to make your sanctions matter a lot less. And they still hurt, but they can still function without them. Right.
I mean, gray markets, alternative trading partners. It's not too hard to get around sanctions,
BRICS
especially
when right. BRICS is really the engine behind that.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not just kind of these traditional grievances and whatnot, but also the very fundamental reality of the fossil fuel picture. And I found this very interesting because I don't know why it hadn't been on my radar before, but I think it just goes to show kind of in some ways how the left is bankrupt. Like, I think that approaching it from humanistic perspective and being like, this is immoral, the way these humans are being treated is immoral, I think that that's fucking righteous. But also at the same time, I think they get too caught up into, like, you know, I don't want to say oppression Olympics in this case, because the Palestinians really have it pretty much as bad as
They've won the gold medal.
anyone. Yeah, they win the fucking gold medal. Really, I mean, in a lot of ways, at least in the last 20 years, right? They definitely feel like they're on the top of the list for the most fucked over people on the planet.
Yeah.
As far as their day-to-day lives go, right? Like, there's all sorts of fucking legacies that we have to figure out how to heal. But, like, in terms of, like, and those traumas are fucking real. But in terms of, like, ongoing, like, inhumanity, like, Palestinians take the fucking proverbial cake. But yeah, I don't know. So I didn't really know much about it, but apparently it's been for like a couple years, or a couple decades, I mean, Israel's been trying to negotiate, right? Kind of the certain Palestinian political factions working with Israeli officials and trying to make policy, right? And some of it has to do with natural gas, because there's gas right off the coast. Obviously, Gaza takes up 25 miles of coast there. And there's natural gas in the Eastern Mediterranean. And it was a point of yet another point of conflict, right? It's the land, it's the olive groves, it's the fucking the blockade that and the checkpoints,
border wall,
right? The wall, right? It's all of those things, but like Palestinians are like, and there's a clip or a paragraph, I think, at the end of this article or the next one that's about gas, where it's just like Hamas straight up says, like, no, we want fucking resources to benefit our people.
Yeah.
And so it's been kind of a point of contention, and they haven't been able to develop this gas field because of the ownership squabble or contested ownership of how to spread the wealth of that gas field. And Egypt has a different gas field on the Nile Delta that's being developed, and I think they want them to be developed at the same time, because it would provide a surplus in excess of what those countries consume and what their projected immediate growth in consumption might be. And so I think there's a plan for export. Or there's dreamings of exports. At least that's how I'm reading the situation. So they want to develop it, because the time to do that would be when Egypt's got a bunch of natural gas getting pumped out, right? And so anyway, if you want to scroll down, so it's just Palestine recently held unprecedented talks with Israel over developing a gas field. This was in 2012.
Yep.
It was negotiating. So as in 2012, they were negotiating. I think I said 2 decades. That's about it.
You did. It is correct, because it started in 1999.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so it's called the Gaza Marine gas field. And they've been trying to fucking figure out how to develop it for 20 years.
Yeah.
And you could scroll down a bit too.
Here where you were saying now, Palestine hopes the development of the gas fields could significantly contribute to its financial independence. And I mean, that would be an interesting change of pace for them. Like, I want to know how you're supposed to sell all your gas and stuff if you can't even, or if you're barricaded in. Is this basically like, hey, we'll still maintain a barricade, but you can trade gas?
Yeah, I don't know what the arrangement was supposed to be, but clearly, like, if you go to I think there's another article, right?
Yeah, there is. We'll go ahead and do.
And so we just got to show that this has been ongoing for a very long time.
Yeah.
And so this is as recent as just a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Right. Is that they gave preliminary approval to develop the gas field and said it requires security coordination. Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that obviously that they ignored the warnings, right? Or that Hamas and the young men who would join an organization and decide to basically commit suicide, basically, because that no one that participated in the October 7th attacks, I think, was naive enough to think they were going to come home to their families, right? Like they knew that was kind of like that was they knew where that ended, right? Where that decision ultimately got them.
Yeah, someone brought up a good point in one of the articles I was reading, and they said that there are people alive who have known nothing other than the way things currently are. Having your water cut off all the time, not having food all the time, etc.
Everybody in Palestine, I think there might be like a handful of fucking old timers, but like they've been kind of under like a more stricter locks and key, I think, since the 67 war.
Mm-hmm.
And it might have even gotten tighter like in the 90s. But like basically 1948, like how many people do you know alive longer than 1948? Like
Not very many.
not that many.
Yeah.
Like my grandpa. So if he happened to survive, and also these are people who like don't have clean water and don't have food and like often have no or sporadic electricity. So like don't have access to world-class health care services, right? And so these are not people who live to be 80 or 90 years old either.
Right.
So pretty much you could say safely the vast majority of the population has only ever known this situation. They've never known fucking peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And so let's see. Currently, the largest demographics are 0 to 14 and 25 to 54.
Mhm.
There's a big bottleneck on either side of that. Real big bottleneck after 54.
Yeah, exactly. They don't live that long.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to live that long. But my point in bringing up those things is that despite all of those things, it seems to me, is it plausible that they're like, oh yeah, we're going to have to share this fucking natural gas, but we're going to, in exchange, get security guarantees. And then now they're like, everybody out of northern Gaza. And we don't know how far this is going to be allowed to go. If they had their way, they would exterminate them all or drive them into the desert. And they're already fucking, with no hint of irony, like when the fucking Jews were expelled or left Egypt and had to wander the desert for 40 years, you're literally going to fucking put these people in exile in the same fucking desert that you wandered for 40 fucking years? Like, I don't know, whatever. No sense of fucking irony at all. Maybe they'll come back with their own fucking Moses and take back the Holy Land, and it all proves that it's just a big circle jerk, right? Of everybody like having the same goddamn regurgitated story of fucking virgin births and all that other fucking bullshit. At any rate, although it can happen, remember we determined a virgin birth is just a more polite way to say anal baby.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Or milkman.
Milkman, yeah. Oh yeah. He kind of looks like the dentist. Shit.
Weird.
It's like, why is he black? I don't know. No, so anyway, it just seems to me like conveniently timed when they're like, oh, okay, finally, but we need security. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, we didn't know. Oh my God. Like,
yeah.
For some reason, our fucking guards weren't where they were supposed to be. And we just happened to like support putting a nightclub literally on the other side of the fence from people who like don't even have fucking clean water to drink. And they have to listen to them fucking party all the time and expect there's not going to be some kind of fucking retaliation or just pure animalistic fucking sense of vengeance, right? Or desire for vengeance. Yeah, and so it's convenient because I bet kind of when this blows over, excuse me, hopefully when it blows over fairly in the next couple years, they'll just be putting a straw in and Palestinians won't get shit.
Oh yeah, yeah,
As soon as stability returns, they're gonna be like, nope, you by your attack, Hamas's attack, of course,
Yeah.
but it's all, they represent all Palestinians, whatever. By virtue of the October 7th attacks, you've proven that like you are not part of this bargain anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll watch. I'll keep an eye on it and see if Israel is gonna fucking act in good faith and allow the fucking Palestinians to have any of the revenue from that gas field after they just fucking, obliterated what built environment they had and needs to be rebuilt, right?
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and that's an even easier way to dehumanize them, is like you don't even have houses to live in.
yeah. All right,
Enjoy your
let's
time
move on to the
outside.
next thing. I just thought that was it was an important piece. Is that,
Yeah.
oh, this isn't new. This gas field they've been talking about it, and then here more recently they're like, all right, we're finally going to move forward, and then all of a sudden like, whoop, we can't hold up our end of the bargain because you fucked up, right?
Yeah,
Israel says.
definitely seems like, oh yeah, we made an agreement knowing that we could just draw it out long enough that we could probably kill all of them.
Yeah,
and the US will back it.
Again, they've already demonstrated time and time again for decades and decades and decades that they regularly engage in collective punishment.
Yeah.
So I could totally see Israel being like, nope, the October 7th attacks, you fucking, by virtue of that happening, you forfeited your right to any of this fucking gas money.
Yeah, I can see that.
And what is fucking Palestine going to do? They're not going to fucking go to any international court, because if you go to the fucking UN Security Council and you have 2 abstentions, everybody else said, yes, we want a fucking humanitarian ceasefire till we can figure out what to do with the fucking humans, the civilians being affected by this bullshit, which is pretty much everybody is a civilian. Humanitarian pause, and the UN, which has veto power, said, no, fuck you. Or the US, I mean. The US vetoed that shit so that there wouldn't be a humanitarian ceasefire.
You mean just like this?
I shall put the draft resolution to the vote now.
Was that our next clip?
No, but I made it the next clip.
In favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2023/773, please raise their hand.
As high as it goes.
Those against?
So Medea goes to the UN.
The result of the voting is as follows.
That's bad.
12 votes in favor, 1 vote against, 2 abstentions.
Now the kicker.
The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to the negative vote of a permanent member of the council.
Yeah, the UN. If I was an expert on anything, my math, and I'm not an expert because I haven't kept reading about it, right? Like, and really, like, people who are experts in a discipline, they'll continue to consume that so that they stay fresh, and also so they continue to expand their understanding. And I have not done that, but I did get a master's degree. I got a master's degree in peacekeeping, which primarily focused, and it was a broader political science degree. There was a lot to it, but my focus,
I hear a cat.
bro, chill the fuck out. Fucking monster. You made me break my thought. No, it's just I studied peacekeeping, and so much of my core classes for my concentration was in the UN Security Council and the UN Department of Peacekeeping. And so knowing that institution quite well, time and again, it's been shown to be structured in such a way that basically the UN is a fucking puppet regime of the victor powers in World War II. That's all it is.
Yeah.
It was a way to maintain the economic. I mean, I think the values, the principles of the UN are okay. I think things like the Commission on Human Rights, rights of women, the environmental program, food and agriculture organizations, a fucking hugely beneficial international coordination body. But the UN Security Council was structured in a way to give any of the major powers, which included China, because I think it's China, Russia, the US, the UK, France are like, I think the 5 permanent members. I might be mistaking one. It's been a while. But basically, like, China got a permanent seat because it's fucking China and they had like 1 billion fucking people and a gigantic economy.
Yeah.
Right.
More now.
Did you pull up the permanent members of the Security Council?
No.
We're not even shooting the poodoo. Is it
I trust
Thursday?
you.
No, it's Monday.
That's Monday. I trust you. You're an expert.
No, I'm asking you because I'm fucking weak on it. But I think it's the UK, Russia, China, US, France, I want to say. But I could be mistaken.
Oh, there you go.
It's definitely not Uruguay.
UK, France, Italy, Japan was what it started with.
No permanent members.
Yeah. Well, they can't be that permanent if they started and it's changed.
Okay. Either way, moving on. What's our next clip? So you spontaneously got that clip. It was perfectly timed because I thought that was kind of bullshit.
Oh, I had that in my pocket, but yeah.
Yeah. I think it's outrageous that we could do that and just say like, no, you don't get a humanitarian and we get a veto.
You got them all, though.
What's
I
that?
finally found it. You got them right.
Yeah. France, UK, US, China, and Russia.
Yep.
Yeah. Some things just you don't. It's like riding a bike, man. You might not be good at it, but you don't forget it. You might feel real awkward. Your legs might be all wobbly when you finally get off it, but
Speaking of China and Russia, though.
Speaking of Russia and China.
Isn't that like the R and the C in some other anagram? Some sort of BRICS anagram?
Talking about BRICS.
Okay, so what happens when you let Saudi Arabia into the BRICS, given the other members? You have 2 of the 3 largest oil producers in the world, Russia and Saudi Arabia. You have 2 of the 3 largest nuclear arsenals in the world, Russia and China. You have, throwing India in and some others, you have about 50% of global population, 54% of global GDP using purchasing power parity. Well, this is not the old third world. These are not basket cases. These are many of the biggest economies in the world that collectively have enormous power, natural resources, gold reserves, landmass, population, military. And again, I could go down the list, but this is a bloc that is as powerful in its own way by a lot of these metrics as the collective West, which I would call, US, Canada,
US,
Western
EU.
Europe, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and a few others.
Yeah. EU, Oceania.
Yeah. Oceania. Nice.
Or the, in the direct sphere of the West.
Mm-hmm.
Japan, South Korea.
So is it all West versus East, just like hip hop?
Is it West versus East? That's what fucking Samuel Huntington said. Well, he said a clash of civilizations. But other theorists talked about fucking multipolarity. And I think that what's interesting about BRICS is that it's not. I mean, I guess it's forming its own pole. So in that sense, it's a multipolar world. But it's like a pluralistic one. Like Brazil is part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So they just kind of took all of the larger economies that could never really thrive because they were always under the boot heel of Western finance, right? They were always ultimately under any development that was happening in these countries. There were Western banks profiting. And now they're like, hey, let's coordinate and do these things. And I don't know enough about BRICS because BRICS wasn't a thing when I was going to fucking college. And I haven't stayed up on it. But as far as I could tell, and I did some digging, there is no real security agreements nested within BRICS. And so, I mean, I'm sure that when it comes to disrupting, right, the more economically integrated these countries become,
Mm-hmm.
the more, like, say, the more that a infrastructure bank of China has invested in, you know, airports and railroads in fucking Iran, they're gonna, like, the bigger problem they're gonna have if some other country wants to fucking bulldoze over their investment, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
there is kind of skin in the game that may stimulate some kind of security response. But generally speaking, that's not central to what BRICS is. But I do see what's happening. And again, contrary to what Norman Finkelstein believed, who has pretty narrow blinders on the kind of cultural, religious, more anti-Zionist perspective than looking at like the bigger picture in terms of like strategic control of resources. And so maybe he's got blinders on and can't see that, like, the US definitely did not move multiple strike carrier groups to deal with fucking like a couple thousand Palestinian terrorists.
Yeah.
Or Palestinian freedom fighters, whatever, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
Maybe they're there to signal, like, hey, don't get involved. Maybe they're there to kind of, because Israel got its ass kicked by Hezbollah once, right? And the US, it was going to be bad for an election. So the US is like, hey, let's back off. This is how I heard the story, at least. Got a phone call and it's like, hey, this is not like, there's a pretty tight election coming up. Like, we need this to fucking calm down. So it's not a news headline. And yeah, and so I guess Hezbollah is like pretty formidable force. And so if Hezbollah gets involved, maybe that's why the US is there. But ultimately, I think they're starting to position assets there because they're getting ready to fucking probably finish taking out Assad, which they had failed to do. Right? He survived for decades of sanctions and warfare, right? And his regime survived, so they might try and do the death knell on him. They might move into to decapitate Hezbollah and all the other kind of like really kind of like they're not states, but they're kind of extra state actors in a lot of ways. I think they are kind of organized political entities, though, like political parties. But I don't think that's it either. I think that the U.S. is sending fucking strike carrier group. I thought 2 were going to the Eastern Mediterranean, and it was like, oh, no, one's actually going to the Persian Gulf. Like, or it was in the Red Sea, and I think it's on its way to the Persian Gulf or something like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, they're spreading naval assets basically around, like almost like blockade style, which is why last week we played that faux news clip that came from Through the Looking Glass or Countdown to Looking Glass.
Yeah, Countdown to Looking Glass.
Yeah, it was Countdown to Looking Glass, because that was like basically a short movie about how we might find ourselves in a nuclear war, and it started with one country closing the Gulf of the Persian Gulf and charging taxes for oil tankers moving through it. Right, to know we're going to get money from it. It was like a cash-strapped government was like, nope, we're just going to tax these fucking oil boats or not let them through. And then it just became a fucking conflict. And actually, that's how another nuclear war movie started. There was fighting in the Persian Gulf, right?
Yeah, that's how some wars have started. Well,
it's a lot of the world's oil and trade goes through the Persian Gulf, and like, if you shut that down, you shut down the global economy. Yeah,
Persian Gulf, Red Sea, surrounding all of this. But as we'll see shortly, here's why it's a major threat to Western powers when BRICS gets Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Ethiopia, Argentina, and what was the last one?
I forget.
I thought I had it. Oh no, Zach, you fucked up. Ethiopia. Oh, Egypt, the big one.
I didn't know Egypt had put a bid in for BRICS.
Yeah. So it's Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, Iran. So it's like
Iran and Saudi Arabia were accepted. Were they not?
They were. I believe the other 6 are already accepted. Yes, I think the other 4 were already accepted as well, and they're going to be entered in January 1st of next year.
Right. So how can we say it's one thing. Israel is doing what Israel is doing because they've been on a conquest of genocide. They have set out on their crusade to rid the Holy Land of its inhabitants and claim it for Eastern European, primarily Jews of Eastern European lineage, ancestry, right? And others from the diaspora that wound up in places like America and shit, and Canada. That may be true. Zionism is fucking pretty fanatical, and I could see people being so committed to that fucking ideological objective that the geopolitics and strategic control of resources part is on the back burner. But there's no way the United States is sending fucking multiple carrier strike groups to the region to help protect Israel from fucking people with rocks and bottles. And fucking improvised rockets. There's no fucking way they're there for that. So what might it be? Maybe Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, Egypt has a fuck ton of gas, being in BRICS. Maybe has a little to do with the US being like, oh, this is really fucking bad, and we are going to put a stop to it.
Yeah. But can they put a stop to it? Now, I mean, I know it's not a defense agreement, but as you said, what hurts one monetarily hurts the others. So once
they fully become economically integrated in the way that I think BRICS is intended, and I think it's imperfect, and I think it's taken them a long to develop. I have full confidence that now that they're taking more members, they have kind of worked some of the kinks out. Because it's been just the core members for quite a while, and I think this is really the first time they've been brought a whole bunch of fucking people on board.
Yeah, it started off with just BRIC, and that was in 2009, I think, and then 2010 they added South Africa. And no one since.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So okay, great. I have the picture in my head properly.
Yes, you do. And so yeah, it's been over a decade.
He's gonna fucking join too.
Yeah, that's the one I get missing. Yeah, UAE. And they're another big producer of fossil fuels. So just basically it's BRICS, collecting all the Pokemon, I guess.
Meme it.
All the energy Pokemon.
Please.
I made a meme. Would you like to see the meme?
Yes. Can you scroll in and/or read it to me?
Oh, okay. It says, "Our people have a right to exist." Yup. So if someone is killing your people, you can defend yourself. Yup. Israel has a right to defend itself. That makes sense to me. And Palestine has the right to defend itself. Hamas are terrorists. It's like everything I fucking read in the news. Anytime someone brings it up, they're like, "Oh, it's just a bunch of terrorists."
Yeah, and last Thursday we didn't even fucking talk about the censorship stuff. A bunch of people, and the live stream this morning with Useful Idiots is Katie Halper and Aaron Mate and Norm Finkelstein. Finkelstein was the guest, and there was a number of times that Aaron pushed back and was like, I disagree with you, because Norman Finkelstein was like, Hamas's fucking actions were more like Nat Turner's fucking rebellion, like slave revolt. He's like, oh, I don't like you comparing them to slaves because it's not the same thing. And then Norm Finkelstein, as a critical thinker, is like, well, here's all the reasons they're similar, and I will grant you that point and that point that they seem dissimilar. But I'm more talking about the fact that like people are like, how could these slaves commit these atrocities? And it's like, yeah, because they were in such a position that when they finally when the powder keg exploded, like it took somebody's fingers off. A
lot of people's fingers off. Yeah,
took a lot of fingers, and they are like, kill Whitey.
Well,
right?
No, and that's a very similar situation because people only really focus on what is happening now, and they're not looking back 10, 20, 50, 75 years and saying like, oh, there is a series of oppressive movements, there's a series of unequal warfare, and massive death tolls being very unequal. And so it's like, maybe there is a reason why all of this is happening, and we can't just sum it up with like the last 2 years. We actually have to look at a longer history. I don't think that people are doing that for this, because I mean they are. There's definitely a lot of people out there that are like, hey,
Yeah.
all this shit happened. This is why this is happening to Israel.
Dude, this is arguably, I haven't seen I mean, obviously the George Floyd protests were, I think, stronger, but I've seen people using like older school fucking protest tactics, like locking themselves down and shit. I've seen a lot of that going on here in the US, and I've seen stuff going on, pardon me, abroad, right? I've actually seen, as much as there's suppression, right, of people telling the truth, and as much as the propaganda game is fucking super thick,
Yeah.
there are a lot of solidarity actions. There are a lot of people, and I think I don't have the details now. Maybe we could talk about it in a future episode. But I think some State Department officials like started elevating fucking concerns and complaints up the ladder. I think there might have been today or maybe Friday like a series of resignations. Um and other things like that, because people in the federal government are like, no, this policy is fucking reckless. Like political fucking strategists and shit are like, Joe Biden, like, you're losing to Trump by fucking, who has like is being indicted on legitimate charges, right? And everybody around him is like admitting guilt, basically. Or not everybody, but many people around him are starting to just admit guilt, right?
Yeah.
And he's still beating Joe Biden by 10 points. And then like political strategists are like, yo, dude, your fucking rhetoric on this shit is not good. I mean, I think I might have mentioned on Thursday, I played board games with a guy who just a couple weeks ago had a fucking Joe Biden for president t-shirt. And he was wearing it. He's like, I don't really wear it out too much because, like, you know, I don't want to be a target for some fucking, you know, piece of shit fucking proto-fascist. We have tons running around everywhere here in Chico. But like, yeah, he says, so I'm wearing it, you know, when he's at home for the whole day and not going out because he's embarrassed to wear it. And he just straight up, the next week we were there, or 2 weeks later or whatever, after this shit popped off, he's like, I'm so fucking mad. He's like, I literally have his fucking merch and shit. I donated money and shit because he's just kind of a shit lib, right? He doesn't really care too much about politics. He's kind of like a reliable Democrat or whatever. And he's just like, nope. He lost my fucking vote. I cannot vote for him. I don't know what to do. He's like, I can't vote for fucking Trump because I fucking hate Trump because I've been told to hate Trump.
Cornel West.
Well, Cornel West isn't going to be on any ballots because he dropped out of the Green Party.
Write him in.
And Robert Kennedy Jr., his stance on Israel is just as shitty, if not shittier than Joe Biden's.
Ooh, that could get him some votes.
Joe Biden is just fucking, well, yeah, I don't know. I don't really care too much about it. I think that Trump's going to fucking win. I think that his base will be emboldened and we'll be right at that flashpoint that they're going to attempt to take over, and we're ill prepared. Not enough. We don't have enough fucking weapons. We don't have enough training. You know, we don't have the fucking unified vision to like allow yourself to ignore self-preservation. Right? It is a thing in war making, right? You have to convince your fucking troops that there's some kind of glory or honor. Those things exist because like you have to override biological programming for self-preservation to wage war.
Well, and then even then you got to get past, you know, firing near the enemy but not at the enemy, because people generally don't want to kill.
I think we're going back to a Nate Higgins clip, right?
We are, but this is going to be the last one before Baby Yoda dances. So are you ready?
I am. Is it the last clip, or are you just like hard off at 10?
No. It's the last clip.
Yeah, so just play this real last clip and then we'll discuss and we'll Baby Yoda.
My girlfriend was out of town last weekend. She got back Sunday night. She's like, so what's going on? And I told her all about the horror and the tragedy, the people in Israel and what was going on. And she's like, well, that sucks. But I was asking you, did you dig out the potatoes? Did you clean the duck pen? Did you chop the wood and stack it like you said you would? And You have to stop worrying about the future and start worrying about today. Of course, I
Good
had no
girlfriend.
response to that other than she was right.
Mhm.
That's all. It's just a nice little lead out to remind us all that things are terrible and we can fret about tomorrow all we want, but don't forget to take care of yourself today.
Yeah, I was just talking to my friend about that last night, last night after games. Actually, it kind of almost became awkward because the guy who hosts us, the one who's like, I can't support Joe Biden anymore.
Yeah.
We kind of, I think, deeply troubled him because me and Ryan me and my friend went off on a tangent and started talking about super heavy shit, and he's in pretty heavy mood about it all. And we were just talking about, I was trying to convince him you could survive fucking nuclear war, and no one wants to believe me.
You know, the wife and I have taken to talking very loudly in public with no regard for what anyone thinks about us. And I'd like to say that we get more laughs and smiles than we do frowns. So just voice your opinion. You never know when you're going to like pass by someone who's like, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I would do that too, and everybody be like, "Come on, Steve, people are looking at you." I was like, "Yeah, they're looking at me because they're listening to what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, they're not like and if they're looking at me because they're like, ugh, I don't want to hear someone else talk at fucking. Then don't go to a fucking public restaurant if you don't want to hear other people talking. It's that easy,
Yeah.
right? Like,
This is a place for
or
public
they're like, oh,
discourse,
you
believe
can
it or not.
be boisterous and loud, but don't fucking do it about politics. Don't
Yeah.
do it about like people, the oppression of people. Don't do it about the ability of fucking human beings to survive nuclear war.
The wife
I
and
thought I
do-
was being
do not-
positive.
Maybe we're both just malfunctional because the wife and I do not consider any of those spaces to be like off for talking about things. You know, like we'll go to a restaurant and like talk to the waiters and stuff like that, and then get on the topic of like, you know, mass strikes and unionization.
No, 100%.
You
And
know?
but the only way we're ever going to affect change is to like convince. See, that's the thing about fucking conservatives that,
Mhm.
that liberals don't do. Do you want to roll the music?
Yeah.
So the thing, I think one of the many things, and we cover a lot of the things that really why the conservative movement has had so much success over the last several decades, and liberalism or the kind of more left factions have proven fucking almost entirely ineffectual.
Hmm.
They can rally around a particular identity,
Hmm.
and and they know who they are, and they listen for those cues. Like they're willing to like, hey guy, like I like your fucking hat when it's a MAGA hat.
Yeah.
Or, oh dude, I love your shirt, and it's like 511 tactical, and they know that person's into fucking guns. And they're like, hey buddy, you know, they're willing to like have these subtle displays and that connect their ideologies. And what do we have? Fucking gay pride flag.
Yeah.
Like, oh, see, I celebrate diversity. I like gay people.
Well, and it's not enough, and like you have to be willing to talk about things in public and ruffle a couple of feathers.
Right.
It helps, especially as it helps other people to know that, like, oh, I am not alone. There are others out there that are thinking the same way that I am, and that helps them to maybe be more boisterous with their opinion as well. And then you get a little snowball effect. But I think that maybe the left has been cowed into not bringing up politics in the public space. And it's like, yeah, but the right wing people will bring up politics. They'll bring up their religion in every public arena, and it's perfectly fine for them. So it's like, oh man,
Well,
I must
I
start
think
talking
that it's
loud.
because our public politics have been completely captured by identity politics, which
Yeah.
fucking prevents us from having real conversations about real things. Not saying that gender and identity issues and all those things aren't real, but they are not what secures your person against violence. They are not what puts food in your belly, right? They are not what secures clean water for you and your family for generations, right? Those things are really kind of superficial. Sure, have a conversation about that, but maybe not make that the center of your fucking your public politics. Because conservatives put their public politics on, I don't like fucking government. I don't like taxes. I want to have guns.
Yeah.
They know clearly what their policies are.
Yeah.
And we lose to two things. We lose to identity politics, and the other was civility politics. I think we're way too focused on, oh, well, don't say it that way because it's rude, and then let's just talk behind each other's backs when, like, look at what's going on in Congress.
Yeah.
They just like, you're fucking fired. We don't want you, and we don't care what we look. We don't care that we look dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Because our job is not to make this look comfortable and happy. Like, our job is just to make your fucking life miserable.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, the country's pretty damn well set up for the rich right now. So really, their whole job is to just buy time.
Is to blow up the system.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they don't want any new rules coming. And then it's, you know, there's not even going to be a pushback from the left before they just take over.
Yeah.
It'll be fear, just like it was in fucking Europe. People are always like, oh, they killed the gays and the Jews. And you're like, well, you know what they killed first? They killed fucking communists first. They killed socialists first. They killed labor organizers first.
And as we've seen recently, we've got a whole lot of anti-Marxist, anti-communist rhetoric floating around.
Oh, and that's been part and parcel of the system from the beginning, but it gets floated out more. People call it California. You're in a wage war against fucking California thinking it's communist? Like, where in California is there communism?
Yeah.
My city council is controlled 6-1 with conservatives. Your city council is probably likewise, like, you know, 6-1 or 5-2 or something conservatives.
I think it was said best when you know, someone said, "Man, I really wish that the left was as radical and left-leaning as yeah, that's the right wing thinks we are." Because I gotta tell you, whatever this is, it ain't left. It's fucking just giving
We
corporations
just gotta have
whatever
a
they
plan
want.
to build our fucking community support networks and say fuck the rest.
Yep.
Like, I'm over
Grow
it.
an apple orchard, y'all. I'll turn that shit into
Order
cider
of
for
the
you.
Militant Apple Orchard.
We'll just make booze and be the most popular people.
We
That's
will.
very
We'll make fucking cider and we'll trade cider for fucking ammunition and shit. It'll be great.
Here you go. Give me your guns. Go get drunk.
Well, today we had talked about how Norm Finkelstein is maybe not absolutely correct, and maybe there is a little bit more to the geostrategic control of resources in the Middle East to explain why this has escalated so quickly, why it escalated from a significant but ultimately a relatively contained act of violence on October 7th into potentially World War III with multiple carrier strike groups in and around the Arabian Peninsula. And we explained that
countries everywhere.
maybe it's not just driven by our unwavering loyalty to a friend, but maybe more our unwavering loyalty to maintaining industrial civilization and an extractive culture until this planet finally kills us off in its own act of self-preservation. And join us Thursday as we shoot the poodoo. We'll figure out what we're going to fucking talk about then, but I'm sure there's a lot going on.
Put your suggestions in the comments.
Put your suggestions in the comments. Ring the bell. Subscribe.
Etc. Etc.
And remember, when liberty dies, it dies with
thunderous applause.
We're going to work on our ending. And I want to make a dance compilation, but for right now, enjoy our friend Grogu.